Right, the price of coal, a discussion. The Industrial Revolution in the northwest of England was driven by coal mining in the Wigan and Leigh area, but what was the cost to the local population? And I think we'll find out that a very dear cost. So the picture there is a courtesy of the Mining Museum at Ostley. Right, just to recap where this society came from. It was the WHAM group, the Wigan Heritage and Mining Monument Group. And they're responsible for that, not Wigan Council. I've had many an argument saying, they're building that bloody thing and there's potholes in our road. And it's subscription of mining families what did that, and sponsorship by people who have an interest in mining. And a lot of them are sat here, so well done to you lot. Now, let's start off with a poem. We'll give an overview of the Industrial Revolution. It's called A Rich Vein of Commerce. A rich vein of black gold deep down underground, under the streets of these old northern towns, to fuel the boilers of the new cotton mills, standing so grim in Lancashire's hills. A new era of commerce in this proud British nation, production and profit and mass exploitation, prepare the workers for mechanisation and the clatter of jennies and looms. Down in the dust of the damp coal faces, under Wigan and Leigh, in those grim grimy places, children haul trucks from morning till night, hardly ever seeing the bright sunlight. Migrant workers in shanties and tumble-down hovels cut canals and tunnels with pickaxe and shovels to transport the coal, the cotton, the yarns, as they transported the people to towns from the farms. The economy's grip tightens on the ranks of the poor. Old cottage industries are wanted no more. Craftsmen are forced like slaves to the mills, as industry spans the bleak Pennine Hills. Thank you. Now, it's 5 technologies of Industrial Revolution, which I'll sort of base this on. In my opinion, the importance of Wigan and Leigh to the Industrial Revolution was due to the synergy and interaction between 5 technologies, which were coal mining, the cotton industry, heavy engineering, the canals, and the catalyst, which was steam power. These technologies put towns like Wigan and Leigh in a much more competitive position than many other northern towns, due to the vast amount of rich seams of coal in the area. That coal would make Wigan workers pay a heavy price for the wealth underground, and that's the price of coal what we're looking for. Now, but just before I get into it, I'm just going off script here. I took a few bullet points, and with a bit of interest because Paul mentioned another talk on Adlington to the Top Lock, and I was thinking Top Lock to Wigan Pier. So I just thought if you start at the canal bank at Top Lock at Cutlass, to your left is the site of the Wigan Coal and Iron Steel Works. And there you'll find the Rabbit Rocks, which feature strange formations of white rocks. They're in fact created by dumping 70 years worth of molten steel slag from the furnaces. They are now a site of special scientific interest due to rare plants thriving there. Also is the site of the Cutlass Hall Colliery, and to the left the Kirklas Engineering Works, which were also in the same area. Further down at Rosebridge, there's more mills and collieries. Only one mill survives and all the collieries are gone. Then you pass by Clarrington Forge and the St Pat's Rugby League ground where there was another colliery. And you cross over Warrington Lane by the Shepherd's Arms, and down there you'll find the site of the old gasworks. Then you pass the Leigh Arm junction of the canal, which led to Westwood Power Station, where countless heavy coal carrying barges went day in, day out. Then walk down to Wigan Pier Basin with its mills and warehouses, and you go across the amazing level 2 listed change line or rover bridge. It's ingenious because it's got ramps what go on a footbridge down to the other side, and the towpath changes from the Douglas navigation. So the towpath links with the Lancaster Canal at Top Lock, and it's amazing. And you'll have walked just over 2 miles by 23 locks, and you've just seen a microcosm of the Industrial Revolution in Wigan. So that's what the 5 technologies were about. Mining operations have been conducted in the Wigan Leigh areas from the earliest of times. There's evidence of the Romans harvesting coal from outcrops and shallow drift mines in the Red Rock and Hay area of Wigan. They may have heated the Millgate bathhouse with coal. The coal industry drove the building of the Duke of Bridgewater's Revolutionary Canal, which opened in 1761. It allowed the pits of Lee to access the Manchester industrial and domestic coal market. Over in Wigan, new technologies were having impact. By 1742, the Douglas had been made navigable and coal could be transported to Tarleton at the mouth of the River Ribble. From there, it was taken down the coast to Liverpool and Dublin on larger seagoing vessels. Wigan's canal coal was in great demand for the well-to-do households of Dublin and Liverpool, renowned for its bright, burning flame and the lovely heat what it gave off. The development of the Liverpool branch canal, linking up with the Douglas navigation at Bersker in 1772, gave Wigan a much-needed direct route to Liverpool. For as steam power began to develop, the demand for coal increased. These canals were built by teams of navigators, navvies, who followed the canals throughout Britain. These navvies were from all corners of Britain and Ireland, living a nomadic life, erecting shanty towns for every stretch of the canal they dug. They worked hard, drank hard, and they ate well, with their own canvas shebeens and bothies, drinking dens, in other words, on site. They had their own camp followers, and many took wives. They would have a simple ceremony, jumping over a broom, hence the saying, living over the brush. And that's the cue for a song, The Navvies. Now we've got the chorus if anyone wants to join in. You never know. And this is a song of the period. Put it on top of there. My name is Geordie Thompson, I'm a man of high renown. I'm known all along the cut and in the nearby town. A gallon of ale, £2 of beef, I'll have every day. And when me work is finished, it's off to get me pay. So it's dig boys, load boys, all away. And we're digging up the cut, me lads of Manchester way. I've cut the turf for many a mile, shovelled out the dirt. I've laboured neath the burning sun, wrapped only in the shirt. Trim away the levels all along the waterway. I've got words here and I've still made a mess. I've laboured beneath, cut me turf for many a mile, shovelled out the dirt, picked me way through frozen earth, wrapped only in me shirt. Laboured neath the burning sun, digging out the clay, to trim away the levels all along the waterway. So it's dig boys, load boys, all away. Digging up the cut, me lads of Manchester way. And I've had me share of battles, you can tell it by me scars. Done me share of porter drinking in the public bars. I've laboured mortal drunk on a poor October's day, and staggered till I nearly fell into the waterway. So it's dig boys, load boys, all away. And we're digging up the cut, me lads of Manchester way. This song is a period song, so it's not me being misogynistic here. And I've had me share of women in many a shanty town. I reckon if I can talk to her, I can always bed 'em down. If I could live me life again, this I always say, a roving navvy I would be along the waterway. So it's dig boys, load boys, all away. And we're digging up the cut, me lads of Manchester way. Dig boys, load boys, all away. And we're digging up the cut, me lads of Manchester way. Thank you. I've not got an exact date for that one, but it's estimated 1790s, that one. You might wonder why the canal at Aspel is the Lancaster Canal. It's because that a series of canals were being built with a view to converge at Preston, and James Brindley to link the Lancaster Canal at Preston to cross the Ribble. And it was a non-starter. It was too difficult a job, and Brindley walked away with it and nobody else would take it on, and that's what happened. The attempt to take the Lancaster Canal across the Ribble was abandoned by James Brindley, Now that the Douglas navigation was linked to Liverpool, the key component for a Trans-Pennine Canal was in place, which in 1816 would link up with the former southern branch of the Lancaster Canal at Aspel. That amazing engineering feat to take the canal from Wigan Pier at the bottom of the Douglas Valley to literally Aspel Moor was a wonder to see with its flight of 23 locks. This completed the Leeds-Liverpool Canal, opening up the pits of Wigan to the East Lancashire markets. It also made Liverpool the major Atlantic port of the northwest. The power of the steam engines had been applied to the weaving looms and spinning jennies. This allowed the mills to move from the hills to the towns on the canal banks. They were now closer to the customers with a ready-made workforce. The canals brought the raw cotton, endless supplies of coal, and it supplied the water and carried the finished product to the markets. The Industrial Revolution had begun in earnest in the mines and mills of the Wigan and Leigh areas. The mines and mills of the Wigan and Leigh areas were the driving force. Now this is a lovely photo. I was brought up in Shevington. Though you can see the beginning of Woodcock Road, they're all demolished and everybody who lived there got moved up to the Shevington estate. So I grew up with our Crookers in Shevington. And I used to go down there playing with them. I think that was demolished in about 1961. And it's a pretty impressive structure that. It's where the village green is now, about 20 yards from the road what goes to the Crook Hall car park. And there was a bit of fun went on there because there was lots of coal that missed the barges. So Crookers used to go kebbing, which is a rope and a bucket filled with oars and drag the canal bottom for coal. And if anybody from Shevington or Beach Hill went kebbing round there, they'll be lucky to get out in one piece. The kebbing rights were defended by blood, you know what I mean? So, amazing place. There were many of these type of gantries in Wigan. The large gantry at Wigan Pier was made redundant by the Lancashire Union Railway, dismantled in the 1900s, we believe. This one at Crookes, so the Standish Pits, John Pitt, Billy Pitt, and Taylor Pitt. Now, Billy Pitt's official name was Giants Hall Colliery, but John William Taylor owned the 3 pits, and that's why it got called Billy Pitt by the locals. A bit of a trivia there. Now you might think, what's he doing here? What's he got to do with pits in Wigan? Well, he was a land-grabbing emperor, or wannabe emperor. So war can be a catalyst for technology. This war was a prime example. In 1807, Napoleon invaded Spain. He installed his brother on the throne as king and declared himself the emperor. The Spanish rebelled. A British expeditionary force was dispatched. Thus began the Peninsular War. This cost Britain dear in men, equipment, and the key is the amount of horses what were lost. It was inhospitable terrain, the mountains, deserts. There was all sorts of. The battles were vicious, and horses from the cavalry, from the artillery, were being killed in massive numbers. The war raged for 5 years. It also introduced the term guerrilla war. That's Spanish for small war, guerrilla, and for sabotaging hit and run engagements. The Spanish partisans were much feared by the French regulars. And I couldn't resist this because it all links in, but this was an exact copy of another war that was fought, which was the War of the Spanish Succession in 1705. Queen Anne was on the throne, and the Duke of Marlborough was in charge of the Allied army, which was the English, the Dutch, the Germans, and the Austro-Hungarians. And the key battle was Duke of Marlborough at Blenheim. This song was a 1705 recruiting song for that war, and it was Queen Anne. But because the target was the same, to take over Spain and stop Napoleon controlling the Mediterranean, this song was used as a recruiting song again 100 years later. And I think you all know this. I think one or two of you might have watch sharp. And so it's done the rounds a bit, this song. And I think everybody will know it. Here's 40 shillings on the drum for them who's brave enough to come and fight a foe today, over the hills and far away. O'er the hills and o'er the main, through Flanders, Portugal and Spain, King George commands and we obey, over the hills and far away. Through smoke and fire and shot and shell, and to the very walls of hell, we shall stand and we shall stay, over the hills and far away. O'er the hills and o'er the main, through Flanders, Portugal and Spain, King George commands and we obey, over the hills and far away. Then falling lads behind the drum, your colours blazing like the sun, along the road to come what may, over the hills and far away. Sing o'er the hills and o'er the main, through Flanders, Portugal and Spain, King George commands and we obey, over the hills and far away. Thank you. I come up with this bit, next bit as well. And the more you get into this, you realise that Sharp wasn't too far away from the truth of what happened, but it was such an infallible and immortal character, you know, that losses of people was horrendous. But the partisans were not only feared of irregular, were not the only feared irregular troops in this war. The soldiers of the Rifle Brigade were used as scouts, snipers and skirmishers, issued with the Baker rifle that offered much greater accuracy and range. The new corps was made up of skilled volunteers from existing line infantry regiments. This was led by Coote Manningham and William Stewart. They used tactics learned from the disastrous American Revolutionary War. An early adopter of camouflage, its troops wore green jackets instead of red coats. They were also taught to operate in pairs on their own initiative, and rather than in line formations under strict orders. And it's believed picking off officers and NCOs was part of the brief. So now we're getting back to there was a causal effect in this war which caused a nightmare in the industrial areas of Britain. As well as the human casualties, the sheer amount of horses lost to the war meant replacements had to be commandeered and sequestrated from the industry and agriculture by the army. This was causing a major transport problem to industry and supply chains. The horses and ponies that pulled coal wagons from pitheads to canals were taken, along with pack animals from the other industries. Men of vision searched for alternatives to horses. Robert Dalgleish was commissioned to build a steam locomotive at Hay Foundry for John Clark, the owner of the Winstanley and Orrell collieries. That locomotive was known as the Walking Horse. It became the first commercially viable steam locomotive in Lancashire. You can still see the remnants of the tramway and the original footings of the Douglas Bridge at the village of Crook in Wigan. There were three types of locomotive which came into use in 1812. Dalgleish's Walking Horse, the Yorkshire Horse of Blenkinsop in Leeds, and Trevithick's traction engine in Swansea. Arguments raged over which was the first locomotive in service, but us Wiganers know which one it was, don't we? And we're not taking no for an answer. So we'll just have a quick look. And that is the canal at Crook, You'll see the stonework there, and the stonework under this is the original stonework. The actual bridge became unsafe and it was knocked down, but it was a public pathway and bridle path, so they made it a footpath only with steel girders and that, but that's the original bridge. And if you trace that up, it goes under the railway line and comes out on another footbridge what goes over Hines' loading bay between Wincanton and Hines'. So it's a lovely walk as well, and it's probably one of the nicest stretches of the Douglas before you get to Adlington. And this is the walking horse of Dalgleish, courtesy of the Wigan Archive system. Now, it's really primitive to us. You see it's got 5 wheels, 4 wheels and a driving wheel. The driving wheel is on a 3rd cogged driving rail. Yeah, thanks for that. And so it only went at 1 speed. I think it was 4 miles an hour, but it was a strong little so it could pull a lot of coal tubs. And there was a viaduct on the Pingot Valley, which that's not long since demolished, but the drawings of it, it must have been really impressive. That carried coal from Pemberton and from Orrell and Winstanley over to Crewe to the tipper down there. One of Trevithick's was a traction engine where the steam engine drove the wheels, and that was the idea what Mr. Stevenson pinched for his rocket about 20 years later. The introduction and success of these locomotives led to a rapid increase in the number and size of mining operations in Wigan, which in turn saw a large rise in the population of the district. As locomotives became bigger and more efficient, the men of vision were planning to maximise their usage. Within 20 years, the railways will be born. Meanwhile, the pits became the driving force of British industry and commerce. An economic model was built on the backs of the men, women and children of the mining towns. As the mine shafts and galleries had to go deeper into the bowels of the earth, the first innovation was the horse gin. This was a wooden structure consisting of a large horizontal wheel powered by a horse, walking in a circle underneath. The mechanism was attached to a smaller wheel with a rope extending down the shaft. Men and equipment were lowered down in large baskets. The horse gin increased production, facilitated development of more robust shaft systems. I'll get a drink of water when I finish this paragraph. As heavy timber supports could be transported into the mine. The horse gin was improved with a capstan, 2 wheels and double ropes. This allowed larger cages to be developed. Now that's the early primitive one. So if you notice, it's just like a well. You've got a drum carrying the rope, and it lowers it down, but lowers the basket with the miners, the tools, and brings the coal baskets back up. You reverse the horse, to change the direction. It's a simplification of what would become like a crown wheel and pinion on a rear wheel back axle. So, for transferring the drive from the back wheels to the drive shaft to the gearbox. So it was a good innovation, and that style was used, but it wasn't big enough. The productivity wasn't enough, so they had some of it different. So this is the capstan type. You've got a central capstan, which has 2 lots of rope, 2 wheels. That meant the basket will be more sort of, how should I say? It will be more stable. And then the cages were developed from this, and that increased productivity a lot more as well. The horse gin was superseded by the steam engine. This allowed even greater access to the pits. Soon there were deeper, more extensive underground workings. Steam-powered winding engines brought huge gains in productivity. These engines were usually enclosed in brick-built winding houses, which became a common sight around Britain. Winding engines were operated by boys or older miners. They had ropes extending to vertical wheels located above a single shaft, which was used to transport workers and materials in cages in and out of the mine. As the mines went deeper into the earth, dangers increased with the highly flammable methane gas. It was known as fire damp. Anyone surviving a fire damp blast would have their lungs collapsed by the carbon monoxide in the gas known as afterdamp, which was created by the explosion. There were roof falls, floods, miners hit by trucks or panic pit ponies. There were also respiratory diseases, silicosis, pneumoconiosis, and this meant life expectancy was quite low in the mining communities. And though we have one of the early cages, at this time of that photograph, cages would have improved immensely, but that was probably one of the old type, which was still, you've probably got 8 miners. You can just see the whites of their eyes basically behind there. There's probably 8 in there, and you'd fit a coal tub in, and that, just getting one coal tub and sending an empty end down, that would increase productivity no end. 8 miners at a time going into the pit. So things were getting hectic down the mines. And on that, we're going to have a little break, recharge your glasses, have a chat about, think of any questions for after, and I'll see you in a few minutes. Thanks a lot. Right, the Mines Act of 1842 was an act of the Parliament of the United Kingdom. This is a very interesting part in the history. I'm not much of a royalist, but I must give a bit of a rap for the young Queen Victoria in this section. This act forbade women and girls of any age to work underground. The act introduced a minimum age of 10 for boys employed in underground work. It was a response for the working conditions of children revealed in the Children's Employment Commission 1842 report. The 19th century methods of coal extraction were primitive, and the workforce, men, women and children, laboured in dangerous conditions. In 1841, about 216,000 people were employed in the mines. The women and children working 11 to 12 hours a day for much smaller wages than men. The public became aware of the conditions in the country's collieries in 1838. I'll just put the text on, sorry about that. In 1838, after an incident at Husker Colliery in Silkstone near Barnsley, a stream overflowed into the ventilation drift after a violent thunderstorm, causing the deaths of 26 children, aged from 8 to 16. There were the girls, 11 girls aged from 8 to 16, and 15 boys between 9 and 12 years of age. The disaster came to the attention of Queen Victoria, who ordered the inquiry. In 1840, Lord Ashley headed the Royal Commission of Inquiry, which investigated the conditions of the coal mines. Commissioners visited collieries and mining communities, gathering information. The report was highlighted by engraved illustrations and the personal accounts of mine workers. Published in May 1842, Victorian society was shocked to discover that children as young as 5 worked as trappers, opening and shutting ventilation doors, other children pushing and pulling coal tubs. Lord Ashley deliberately appealed to Victorian prudery, focusing on girls and women wearing trousers and working bare-breasted in the presence of boys and men. Such an affront to Victorian morality ensured the bill was passed. The bill was opposed by Lord Londonderry. Now we're going to deal with him later because he was an absolute tyrant. And if you speak to a Geordie and mention Lord Londonderry, he'll spit on the floor before he starts talking about him. They still hate him all these years. Now, there's a bit of my conjecture here, so this isn't based on fact, it's based on my opinion, this paragraph here. It was suggested in some quarters that the removing of children and women from the pits and the children from the mills in the 1842 Reform Act, followed by the reduction of hours in the 1844 Factories Act, caused a significant labour shortage in industrial areas. They suggested that the laissez-faire or let things take their course attitude of the British upper classes to the Irish famine and the sheer amount of evictions of Irish tenant farmers was indeed evidence that the industrialists and absentee landlords were using the famine to supply cheap labour to Britain's industrial heartland. It was, in other words, an Irish clearance. They had the Highland clearance when they evicted all the clansmen over to Canada. And this was the Irish one, in my opinion. They were using the famine to supply cheap labour to Britain's industrial heartland, thus driving wages down. There is no conclusive evidence to this, but I'm sure any self-respecting gambler would consider it a certainty. It is also interesting that in the height of the famine in 1847, Ireland's food exports had increased dramatically from the 1844 levels. That means people were starving and the exports of food from Ireland to Britain went exponentially high. Now we're coming up to Mr. Londonderry. He is George Henry Robert Charles William Vane Tempest. His mother had a struggle shouting him for a tea when he was playing out with mates. He was the 5th Marquis of Londonderry and the Marquis of Seaham. He was a coal owner, infamous for his actions during the 1844 Durham and Northumberland strike and his opposition to reform of working practices in the mines. Right. Now, in spite of Lord Londonderry's opposition, the Mines Act of 1842 passed through the House of Lords at its 3rd reading on the 1st of August 1842, although much watered down by the despotic lord, and that's being nice, that. 2 years later, in 1844, Lord Londonderry forced the Durham and Northumberland pitmen to strike by reducing the wages by 10%. When they went out on strike, he brought in destitute Irish tenant farmers from his Irish estates, along with redundant Welsh slate miners and Cornish tin miners to replace them. All in all, 20,000 North East pitmen were on strike, suffering severe deprivation and brutal treatment. It's no exaggeration to describe Londonderry as a tyrant. In 1844, he not only evicted strikers and their families from their homes, he also issued his infamous Seaham letter, which warned that any local trader who provided strikers with credit would be driven out of business. A few years later, he strongly opposed the 1850 Coal Mines Inspection Act, which ensured that mines were subject to government safety inspections. Seeing the success of Londonderry's tactics, coal owners from other areas did the same wage reductions. That's a cue for a song. I'll have to try and get my best Geordie accent on now for this one. It mentions a Mr. Roberts, who was one of the union organisers for the North East Miners Federation. And it also mentions a ranter. So a ranter was like a sort of primitive Methodist preacher, fire and brimstone sort of guy who looked after the spiritual well-being of the miners. My name is Geordie Patterson, a pitman to me trade. I work the pits of Durham, I've done it all my days, but with a wife and bairns to feed and clothe, our pay is not enough. So we'll go on strike for our 10%, in unity we'll trust. The ranters all is preaching, God is on our side. He'll help us in our struggle, sweep the tyrants all aside. He says he is a poor man's God, in him we must abide. And the reapers of the old black coal will never lose the pride. Now they tell us don't use violence, it shall not be our way. But the tempers of coal owners, they go stronger every day. With evictions mounting daily, we are cast out in the street. And I think I would like very much this poor man's God to meet. Now they've kicked us out of house and home, we live out on the fell. No food to fill our bellies with, we might just be in hell. The children live on nettle broth, it's such a pitiful sight. Where is Mr. Roberts now and his great trade union might? They brought in foreign pitmen to work down our mines. They've taken our homes and jobs while we lie cold outside. We'll have to call the old thing off and go back to the coal. With all things lost and nothing gained, and work down that black hole. Now, other coalfields use the same tactics as Londonderry, including Wigan. And this is a song from Lee, collected by Mary Thomason. Mary Thomason was born in 1862 and she died in 1932. But she was a working class girl. Her parents were, the females of her family were cotton spinners and the males were colliers. And she was an avid collector of stories, memoirs, poems, and dialect songs, especially about the industry of Lee. Much of her stuff is lost. There's one of her works on Google Books. I don't think it's in print. You'd probably have to pay something like £40 for a copy. But I think you can get it on Google Books. But it would have been published in the 1900s. I'll have to put the fishing tackle on. A lot of the songs are in dialect. Do you want it in full dialect, or do you want me to water it down a bit? Full dialect. Come Murray, put me picklogs by from jacket, shake the dust. We've gone on strike for 10%, we'll get it, lass, I trust. There's nowt as worms are as a wheel, there's a gradely fire a coal. And it's much as collier lads can do to keep body with the soul. We've gone on strike for 10%, we're not downhearted yet. We've gone on strike for 10% and 10% we'll get. Don't bother much for food for me, just see Joe's enough. If thee and he get decent meals, I'll put up with rough. And cheer up me bonny lass and little Joe, don't fret. Yon hobby horse, as I promised thee, when strike is o'er thou'll get. We've gone on strike for 10%, we're not downhearted yet. We've gone on strike for 10% and 10% we'll get. I've had hard work to hold me up, but now I'm brought so low. And gaffers want us back up pit, but back where winner go. I've been on strike for many a week, this time we're staying out. And little Joe mun understand it's nor his father's fault. We've gone on strike for 10%, we're not downhearted yet. We've gone on strike for 10% and 10% we'll get. So we had a situation where the hours have been reduced, the miners were working harder. The women have been put, and kids have been put on the screen, as the Geordies called it, or the pit brew as we called it. And they were working harder, and the pay was even cut further. And those strikes were trying to get the 10% back for the face workers. Right. In spite of Londonderry's, oh, we've done that, haven't we? Right, and we're moving on to Wigan now, and disasters what happened in Wigan, and we call it the Wigan and Lee area, and the what's known as the Wigan coalfield. It gets pretty horrendous. So in the 1840s, there were over 1,000 pit shafts within a 5-mile radius of Wigan town centre. Coal from Wigan and Lee powered the Industrial Revolution. The lives of local families revolved around the mining industry, with men and boys from the same family working underground, whilst girls and women worked on the surface. They worked long hours, confronting danger and health problems on a daily basis. Coal was essential to the industrial development of Britain. Engines that drove prosperous industries depended on coal. Developments in transport created a further demand for coal, whilst homes for the both rich and poor depended on coal for heating and cooking. Many coal owners strongly opposed the 1850s Inspection Act, which ensured that mines were subject to government safety and inspections. Lord Londonderry being their champion. The unions fought for another 30 years to have a national miners' federation rather than the fragmented local miners' federations. There was much recruiting, and you'd have the union representative and everything. It'd be saying something like, you pit brew lasses, you're working 12 hours a day, in any conditions, your hands are cut to ribbons, you've not even got a pair of gloves or gauntlets, you're tying them in rags, and what for? A pittance. And you face workers crawling in a 3-foot seam, swinging a pick in 6 inches of water, and they give you that pittance as if they're giving you a gift. And then the ballad singer would take over. Now don't you think they're making you a gift? They'll pay a bloody pittance for a shift. And while you're sweating out your soul for every ton of coal, there's 2 tons of dirt and rock you have to shift. You're working in a 3-foot seam. I'll tell you boys, life is not a dream. And there's no joys to be found 2 miles underground, and you're working in a 3-foot seam. That's the chorus. And I think I've got it here. So, singing's compulsory on this one. Up above the ground the weather may be fine, but you're stuck there where the sun don't ever shine, and you're crawling like a rat, in your heart you're wishing that you was any place except down in the mine altogether, and you're working in a 3-foot seam. Well, I'll tell you boys, life is not a dream, and there's no joys to be found 2 miles underground, and you're working in a 3-foot seam. These bad conditions have prevailed for far too long. So join our union, then we cannot be far wronged. Then together we can tell the bosses, go to hell. 'Cause our union voice is many thousand strong. And you're working in a 3-foot seam. I'll tell you boys, life is not a dream, and there's no joys to be found 2 miles underground, and you're working in a 3-foot seam. Well sung, thank you very much. Now, the coal that brought prosperity to Wigan and Lee and the surrounding townships has over the years caused the deaths of hundreds of miners. The total reported killed in mining explosions and accidents in the Wigan coalfield between 1830 and 1980, which is a period of 150 years, is over 1,000. In the early days, deaths from industrial accidents and diseases were not recorded. The worst disaster of the whole of Wigan and Lee area was the Pretoria Pit explosion. The Pretoria Pit bordered Atherton, West Orton and Little Hulton. It was the 21st of December, 1910, 4 days before Christmas. 344 men and boys perished. It was a total disaster for the district, with most of the menfolk killed in one single explosion. That was the true price of coal, what the working people were paying. The most devastating explosion for the Wigan area was in Abram. It was 5 o'clock in the afternoon, Tuesday, August the 18th, 1908, when an explosion ripped the heart out of the number 1 pit at Abram's Maypole Colliery. 76 men were killed in Wigan's biggest mining disaster. It was an unprecedented tragedy for the locality. In the aftermath of a disaster, the first rescuers were colliery deputies and volunteer miners. Excuse me. They descended into the pits to look for signs of life, rescue the injured, seal off the underground fires and recover bodies. They worked in dangerous conditions, sometimes at great cost to themselves. Their only specialised equipment was safety lamps to detect gases. They were the predecessors of the mines rescue teams, recommended in a Royal Commission of 1886, but not made compulsory until the Coal Mines Act of 1911. Maybe those two disasters would not have happened if they'd have been able to get the Act through Parliament. The National Federation of Mine Workers achieved a lot more unity in the coal industry from 1888 on, but the major advances for the miners came with the formation of the NUM in 1945 after nationalisation. The final mining disaster in the Wigan and Lee area was the Goulburn Colliery disaster in 1979. On March the 18th, an underground explosion ripped through the coalface, sending a fireball shooting down its tunnels. The blast was caused after a damaged ventilation shaft led to a build-up of methane gas. The gas ignited after an electrical circuit test. 3 men were killed instantly. 7 more later died in hospital as a result of serious burns and lung injuries. Only 1 man survived the accident. Sorry. On March the 6th, 1984, the National Coal Board announced that the agreement reached after the 1974 strike was obsolete, and that to reduce government subsidies, 20 collieries would close, with a loss of 20,000 jobs. The miners' strike of 1984-85 was an attempt by miners to stop the National Coal Board and the government of Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher shutting down collieries. Parkside Colliery was the last working pit that was owned by British Coal in the Lancashire coalfield. When it closed, it was the end of a Lancashire coal industry that had a history of arguably 700 years. At 7:15 a.m. on Friday, the 23rd of October, 1992, the President and Secretary of the Parkside branch of the National Union of Mine Workers were called into the colliery manager's office and told that from 7 p.m. that night, all coal production would cease. Lancashire, along with all the other British mining areas, had paid the full price of coal. Now, we won't finish off with a poem and then a song. And the poem is one I wrote about the Maypole Colliery disaster. At Abram, in the Wigan coalfield, the year 1908, 18th of August on a Tuesday eve, a rumble shook the street. To tell the colliers' families of disaster down the mine. They ran down to the pit from home and hearth, the menfolk for to find. The column of pit dust and soot rose out of number 1. To the fan house and the lamp house much damage had been done. 76 poor pitmen still down the 4-foot face. Rescue teams from Wigan Junction tried to tunnel to that place. 3,000 feet below the ground, the explosion, it occurred. Foul air, fire, gas and dust, all in that hellish world. Rescue men from Garswood Hall went down shaft number 2 to try and reach survivors in that man-made hell below. Soon, just after midnight, the first miner's body was found. Hours later, they found more bodies, all spread out on the ground. Some had covered their heads and eyes against the fireball's heat. Some knelt in prayer as they knew the fate in the seconds left to live. On Wednesday, the 19th, they knew the death toll's full extent. All 76 men in the shaft, they now were listed dead. The bodies could not all be found as new fires sprang to life, with rescuers themselves rescued from that place of death and strife. The smoking, burning shaft of hell at that pit maypole was impassable to the rescue teams as the fires raged below. Gallons of water were pumped in to flood that blazing hole, to quench the flames and seal the tombs of the men who died for coal. This song was written by a lady from Nova Scotia. Nova Scotia has had its own fair share of tragedies in mining. There was the Spring Hill disaster. Hugh McCall wrote a song about that in the 1950s. There was nearly 400 men killed in that. There was over 400 men killed in the Plymouth disaster. And Spring Hill had another disaster which was quite serious as well before. So there's a good few, well over 1,000 going on to 2,000 been killed in Nova Scotia in the mines. And Rita, sadly she's passed away now, but she wrote this song. It's accepted as a bit of a miners' anthem. When miners get together in South Wales, they always sing this song. And so it's a unofficial anthem of the miners, of the English-speaking world. This is the chorus. We've got it there, haven't we? It's a working man I am, and I've been down underground, and I swear to God, if I ever see the sun, oh, for any length of time, I could hold it in my mind. I never again would go down underground. At the age of 16 years, he quarrels with his peers, and they vowed they'd never see another one. In that dark, deep recess of the mine, where your age before your time, and the coal dust, it lies heavy on your lungs. And it's a working man I am, and I've been down underground, and I swear to God, if I ever see the sun, oh, for any length of time, I could hold it in my mind. I never again would go down underground. And at the age of 64, he'll greet you by the door, and he'll gently lead you by the arm through the dark recess of the mine. He'll take you back in time, and he'll tell you of the hardships that were had. And it's a working man I am, been down underground. I swear to God, if I ever see the sun, oh, for any length of time, I could hold it in my mind, I never again would go down underground. Now my lungs are filled with dust, in God I still must trust, until I breathe the air in heaven so fresh and clean. That's where all the miners go, long before the time, I'm sure, to a place above instead of down below. And it's a working man I am, and I've been down underground, and I swear to God, if I ever see the sun, oh, for any length of time, I could hold it in my mind, I never again would go down underground. No, I never again would go down underground. A man stood at the pearly gates. His face, it was worn and old. He stood before St. Peter for admission to the fold. St. Peter asked, "What have you done in your life to gain admission here?" The man replied, "I've been a coal miner, sir, for many, many years." The pearly gates swung open wide. St. Peter rang the bell. He said, "Come in and choose a seat, my lad. You've had your share of hell." Thank you very much.